Hello, gentle listener. Welcome to Pets for Sleep. Whether you are returning tonight or discovering this quiet corner for the first time, this is a place to slow the pace, learn something gentle about the animals we love, and let the day grow softer around you. Tonight, a cat and a dog are sharing the same room. The dog is resting on the floor, watching a person's hands, face, and posture. The cat is sitting higher, perhaps near a window, with one ear turned toward a faint sound behind the wall. Both animals are awake and paying attention, but they are not paying attention to the same things. The dog may rise when its name is called. It may follow a pointed finger toward a toy, sit when asked, or look back at a person when a problem becomes difficult. The cat may hear its name and remain exactly where it is. It may ignore the pointing hand, then notice a tiny movement near the curtain that no one else has seen. From a human point of view, the dog can seem more obviously intelligent. But is that really true? If you enjoy these quiet journeys through the lives of animals, you're welcome to subscribe. And if it feels natural, to leave a comment sharing where you're listening from tonight, or which pet is nearby as you listen. It helps other animal lovers find their way to this calm corner of the world, one sleepy companion at a time. The dog responds in a way that is easy to notice and reward. The cat's response may be smaller. An ear turns, the eyes narrow, and the body becomes still. A decision may be happening without any movement at all. This is why the familiar question, which animal is smarter, is harder than it first appears. Intelligence is not one single ability stored inside the brain. It is a group of abilities working together. Memory keeps track of a hidden toy, a familiar route, or a person who has left the room. Self-control prevents an animal from reaching straight toward food when a clear barrier blocks the way. Social intelligence helps it notice a face, voice, gesture, or another animal's attention. Spatial skill helps it judge distance and remember hiding places. Learning connects an action with what happens afterward. A sound may predict dinner. A hand signal may predict a reward. A visible action is only the last part of a longer process. Before the dog comes when called, it must hear the sound, separate it from background noise, recognize the pattern, remember what it meant before, and decide that responding is worthwhile. Before the cat turns toward a movement, light must reach the eye, sensory cells must react, and the brain must compare the new signal with the still background. The retina is the thin layer of light-sensitive tissue at the back of the eye. It changes light into electrical signals that travel along nerves. Similar changes happen in the ears, nose, whiskers, and skin. Outside information must become nerve signals before the brain can use it. That means intelligence begins before an animal solves a puzzle. It begins with what the animal can detect. It continues with what the animal notices, remembers, and expects to happen next. Only then does it become visible as a choice. A dog may be especially good at reading a person because thousands of years beside humans rewarded close attention to human movement. A cat may be especially good at waiting, listening, and predicting because its ancestors often hunted small prey alone, where one poorly timed movement could end the attempt. These are different ways of gathering and using information. Even the same room can become two different worlds. Near the floor, the dog's nose collects chemical traces left by shoes, food, skin, and another animal that passed through earlier. Near the window, the cat locates a faint sound by turning its ears and comparing what reaches each side of the head. One animal may be reading recent history. The other may be predicting the next movement. So the real question is not only whether cats or dogs are smarter. It is what kind of problem each one was built to solve, and whether the test we choose can see the answer. Before any winner can be named, we need a fair ruler, and the ruler itself may already be leaning toward one side. Inside a quiet research room, two identical containers sit on the floor. Each one is about 2.5 meters from the animal waiting at the other end. An experimenter places food beneath one container, then points toward it. The gesture may remain in place until the animal chooses, or the hand may return to the experimenter's side before the animal begins moving. To succeed, the dog or cat must first attend to the person. The direction of the finger, then, has to be connected as with an object some distance away. After holding that location long enough to approach, the animal must choose one container and ignore the other. This is called a two-choice pointing task. It looks simple because humans use pointing from early childhood. A fingertip, however, contains no food and touches neither container. Its meaning comes from understanding that one body movement refers to something beyond the body itself. Researchers use other tasks to separate different abilities. In a transparent cylinder test, food can be seen through a clear wall. Reaching straight toward it produces contact with the barrier, so success depends on moving around to an open end. A detour task places a fence or screen between the animal and a visible destination. Delayed memory tests hide an object, wait for several seconds or minutes, and then allow a choice. Hidden object tasks examine whether the animal continues searching after the object has disappeared from view. The unsolvable box experiment begins with a container the animal can open. Once that action has been learned, the container is quietly fixed shut. Researchers then observe whether the animal keeps working, leaves the task, or looks toward a nearby person. Each apparatus has a carefully planned purpose. The result still depends on far more than the ability named in the study. Comfort in the room affects whether attention stays on the containers. Food must remain valuable after repeated trials. An unfamiliar person may attract interest in one animal and caution in another. Handling, travel, strange flooring, and nearby sounds can change behavior before the formal test begins. Body shape matters as well. A clear cylinder that is easy for a muzzle to enter from the side may be awkward for a paw. Barrier height can alter whether an animal sees a route around it. Even the surface beneath the feet can influence confidence and movement. These details became especially important in a direct comparison published in 2023. 21 small dogs and 43 cats entered the larger testing process. The laboratory room measured approximately 3 meters by 5.4 meters. During the pointing test, 2 containers were placed around 2.5 meters from the animal. Each participant could receive 28 trials. The researchers recorded a correct choice when the indicated container was selected. Choosing the other container counted as incorrect. Remaining in place, wandering away, or failing to choose produced a no-choice trial. All 21 dogs made a choice in at least half of the laboratory trials. 33 cats reached that stage of testing, yet only 15 chose often enough to meet the same participation requirement. Among the animals producing usable results, dogs followed the human indication more successfully. That finding gives dogs a real advantage in this particular form of social communication. The cats also revealed why a score needs careful interpretation. Some would not leave their carriers, others hid, stopped accepting food, became less willing to participate, or made too few choices for a reliable result. Fatigue may have contributed as the trials continued. Repeated handling and an unfamiliar room may also have reduced interest. When some cats were later tested at home, participation improved, although their pointing performance still did not reach the dog's level. A research result therefore passes through several filters before it becomes a number. The animal has to detect the gesture, interpret it, remember the location, value the reward, and feel willing to move. Previous experience shapes every stage. The dimensions of the apparatus shape the action available at the end. A dog that completes nearly every trial supplies a clear record of its choices. A cat resting behind a bed supplies no comparable score, even when it may behave very differently in familiar surroundings. The experiment measured a genuine canine strength, while also exposing the difficulty of placing two species beneath one measuring line. Dogs and cats arrive with different expectations about strangers, cooperation, food, and unfamiliar spaces. Those expectations began forming long before either species entered a modern laboratory. Long before bowls, pointing hands, and research rooms, the ancestors of dogs and cats were solving very different kinds of problems. A wolf-like canid depended heavily on the movements of other members of its family group. Modern wolves usually live in social units, built around breeding parents and their offspring. Older descriptions often imagined a collection of unrelated animals, locked in a constant struggle for rank. Field studies later showed a more familiar structure, closer to a family traveling, resting, hunting, and raising young together. Within that group, attention to others carried practical value. A change in posture could signal that movement was about to begin. The direction of another wolf's head might reveal prey, danger, or a shift in the group's route. Young animals learned by watching older ones approach food, cross difficult ground, and respond to unfamiliar scents. Access to a carcass or resting place also depended on recognizing which animals were nearby and how they were behaving. This social setting rewarded brains that could monitor several bodies at once. Gaze, direction, distance, and movement all became useful information. Coordinated hunting added another layer. A large prey animal could turn suddenly, separate from the herd, or move toward rough ground. Success depended on adjusting to what both the prey and other group members were doing. The animal acting alone faced a different calculation. The wildcat lineage that eventually produced domestic cats developed across parts of the Near East and North Africa. These small felids usually hunted rodents, birds, reptiles, and other animals that could disappear into cover within seconds. A hunting cat often worked without a partner. Its sequence began with detection. The body then lowered close to the ground. Steps became slow and carefully placed. Movement could stop for long periods while the cat waited for a better angle. the final rush had to begin at a useful distance. This style of hunting rewarded precise timing and strong control over immediate movement. A cat that rushed too soon could warn the prey. Waiting too long could allow the opportunity to vanish. The brain had to compare sound, movement, distance, and cover before releasing the body into action. Detailed knowledge of territory also mattered. A familiar range could become a stored map of walls, paths, hiding places, water sources, and resting sites. Likely prey locations became part of that map as well. A gap beneath a rock, a patch of grass beside a wall, or a narrow trail through brush could hold repeated value across many nights. Remembering these places reduced the need to search at random. The contrast between these ancestral lives shaped attention in different directions. Group living increased the value of watching companions and responding to shared movement. Solitary hunting increased the value of holding still, predicting a brief event, and acting without consultation. Natural selection works through repeated consequences across generations. Animals with useful traits are more likely to survive, reproduce, and pass some of those traits onward. Over long periods, this process can strengthen tendencies that fit a particular environment. It does not create identical behavior in every individual. It shifts the range of abilities that commonly appear within a population. The word solitary can also be misleading when applied too broadly to cats. Domestic cats can form selective relationships with people and with other cats. Where food is concentrated, such as around farms, fishing ports, or stable human settlements, groups may form around reliable resources. Related females may rest near one another and help raise kittens in the same area. Individual cats can develop preferred companions and avoid others. Their ancestral hunting pattern still placed less daily pressure on coordinated teamwork. A cat could often complete the entire hunting sequence alone. A wolf-like canid regularly benefited from keeping track of partners. Those old pressures remain visible in modern behavior. A dog entering a research room may look toward the experimenter for guidance because attention to a social partner fits a long-established strategy. A cat may inspect the containers, watch the room, and make its own decision with less interest in the person standing nearby. Both animals are carrying forward systems that once solved different survival problems. Those systems later entered human settlements, where cooperation, tolerance, and access to food began changing each species along separate paths. Human camps gave the ancestors of dogs a new social environment, long before fields, granaries, or permanent farming villages became common. The exact beginning remains debated. Researchers continue to compare ancient bones and genetic evidence from Europe and Asia, and no single location has been accepted as the clear birthplace of the dog. A close relationship was firmly established by the end of the last ice age. Near Bonn, Germany, archaeologists found the remains of a dog buried beside two people at a site called Bonn Oberkassel. The burial dates to roughly 14,000 years ago. Its careful placement shows that dogs were already living within human communities thousands of years before agriculture spread widely across Europe. Early dogs gained access to scraps, shelter, and safer resting areas near people. Individuals that tolerated human movement could remain closer to those resources. An animal able to notice where people were traveling, when food was being handled, or whether a person was calm, had a practical advantage. Those tendencies could pass into later generations. Domestication develops through this repeated difference in survival and reproduction. A person does not need to plan every change. When particular traits make life beside humans easier, animals carrying those traits leave more descendants over long periods. Human choices gradually added stronger pressure. Dogs were kept for guarding camps, carrying loads, locating scents, and helping during hunts. Much later, particular populations were shaped for herding livestock, retrieving birds, hauling sleds, guarding property, performing scent work, and living mainly as companions. Each job rewarded a slightly different collection of abilities. A herding dog had to notice the direction of animals and respond quickly to distant human signals. A retriever needed to remember where an object had fallen, move toward it, and return with it. Scent-working dogs followed chemical traces, while remaining connected to a handler's instructions. Repeated cooperation made human attention increasingly valuable within many dog populations. Cats entered human settlements along another route. Around 10,000 years ago, farming communities in the Near East began storing harvested grain. Large food stores supported growing numbers of mice and rats. Wildcats living near those settlements found prey concentrated around walls, storage rooms, and discarded food. People benefited when the cats reduced animals that damaged grain. The cats gained hunting grounds without needing to join coordinated human work. They could remain near houses while continuing to catch prey and reproduce with less direct management. Ancient genetic evidence links domestic cats mainly to Felis sylvestris libica, the wildcat native to the Near East and North Africa. Cats from Near Eastern populations spread with early farmers during the Neolithic period, when agriculture moved into new regions. Egypt later became another important center of cat dispersal. During the classical period, beginning more than 2,000 years ago, cats traveled farther along roads and sea routes, used by expanding cities and empires. Farmers carried them into new settlements. Traders moved them between ports. Mariners kept cats aboard ships where stored food attracted rodents. A useful hunter could step ashore in a distant harbor and become part of a new local population. This movement slowly carried domestic cats through Europe and beyond. Their appearance remained surprisingly close to that of wildcats for much of this history. Ancient DNA shows that a genetic variant linked with the blotched tabby coat became common mainly after the Middle Ages. That timing suggests strong human selection for particular feline coat patterns developed relatively late. For thousands of years, people valued cats mainly for what they did around grain, buildings, and ships. Their independent hunting ability remained useful. Dogs experienced more sustained selection for tasks performed directly with people. Cats prospered through a looser partnership that allowed greater control over their own movements. Both species moved closer to humans, yet the daily rewards were different. A dog often gained food or safety by watching a person and joining an activity. A cat often gained food by noticing the rodents living beside that person's stores. Those separate histories help shape the modern dog that waits for a hand signal, and the modern cat that scans the room before choosing whether to approach. Their behavior grew from many generations of bodies and brains adapting to life beside us. The physical traces of that history can now be examined inside the nervous tissue that receives a sound, holds a memory, and turns information into action. Inside the skull, billions of living cells receive signals, pass messages, and help turn experience into behavior. One region has attracted special attention in comparisons between cats and dogs. The cerebral cortex is the folded outer part of the brain. It helps combine information from the senses, connect events with earlier experience, select actions, and adjust behavior when conditions change. A smell can be linked with a familiar person. A sound can become connected with food. The location of a hidden object can be held long enough for the animal to search for it. Much of this work depends on neurons. Neurons are specialized cells that carry electrical and chemical messages through the nervous system. Each neuron can form connections with many others, creating networks that process information across the brain. Counting those cells is difficult because brain tissue contains several cell types packed closely together. Researchers used a method called the isotropic fractionator to estimate how many neurons were present. The name sounds complicated, though the basic idea is fairly direct. A measured piece of brain tissue is gently broken apart until its cell nuclei are spread evenly through a liquid. A nucleus is the small structure inside a cell that contains most of its genetic material. Researchers stain the nuclei so they can be seen and counted beneath a microscope. A second stain identifies which nuclei came from neurons. Samples from the liquid then allow the total number of cells to be estimated. In a study published in 2017, this method was used on the brains of several meat-eating mammals, including one domestic cat and 2 domestic dogs. The cat's cerebral cortex weighed about 24.2 grams. It contained an estimated 250 million neurons. The smaller dog was a mixed breed, weighing 7.45 kilograms. Its cortex weighed about 46.2 grams and contained around 429 million neurons. The larger dog was a golden retriever weighing 32 kilograms. Its cortex weighed about 84.8 grams and contained approximately 623 million neurons. The whole brain of the cat held an estimated 1.2 billion neurons. The smaller dog had about 1.8 billion. The golden retriever had roughly 2.6 billion neurons across its brain. These figures give dogs a clear lead within this small comparison. The golden retriever had more than twice as many cortical neurons as the cat. The smaller dog also exceeded the cat by about 179 million cortical neurons. A larger number of neurons can provide more units for storing, combining, and passing information. The researchers therefore described dogs as having greater biological capacity for complex and flexible behavior. Brain size alone did not explain every result. The golden retriever's cortex weighed almost twice as much as the cortex of the smaller dog. Its neuron count was only about 46% higher. The larger piece of tissue contained more neurons, although those neurons were packed at a different density. Other species in the study made the pattern even less predictable. A raccoon had far more cortical neurons than researchers expected from the size of its brain. Its cortex contained a number in the range found in some primates with similarly sized brains. A brown bear had a brain many times larger than the cat's. Even so, the bear's cerebral cortex held a neuron count close to the cat's estimate of 250 million. Large brains require energy. Neural tissue is expensive for the body to maintain because neurons need a steady supply of oxygen and fuel. different mammal groups have evolved different balances among brain size, neuron density, body size, and energy use. This helps explain why weighing a brain cannot reveal its cell count with complete accuracy. The dog numbers remain important. They provide anatomical evidence that the dogs examined had more cortical processing units available than the cat examined. The comparison also came from only 3 domestic animals. One cat cannot represent every cat. 2 dogs cannot show the complete range found among hundreds of dog breeds and mixed populations. Neuron totals also leave many parts of intelligence unmeasured. They do not show how efficiently networks communicate or which kinds of information receive priority. A count cannot reveal whether an animal values a reward, feels comfortable in a room, or chooses to cooperate with a person. Memory strategy and sensory specialization also depend on how cells are arranged and connected. Dogs have taken a meaningful lead in the physical count. The value of that advantage depends partly on the signals arriving for those neurons to process. A lowered nose and a rotating ear can begin with the same basic currency of nerve activity, while delivering very different versions of the surrounding world. From the outer cortex, nerve pathways extend toward the eyes, ears, nose, skin, whisker follicles, and muscles. Every visible choice begins with information arriving through one or more of those routes. Return for a moment to the room where the cat and dog have been resting. A person looking across it may notice the wooden floor, the window, a chair, and 2 familiar animals. The dog receives a much denser chemical record near ground level. Scent molecules cling to dust, fabric, shoes, skin, and the places where another animal recently walked. The cat receives faint sounds from behind the wall and tiny movements along the sharp edges of furniture. Light shifting beneath a curtain may matter more than the color of the curtain itself. Neither animal experiences a complete copy of the room. Each nervous system gathers selected pieces and builds a useful picture from them. This process begins inside receptor cells. A receptor is a cell, or part of a cell, that responds to a particular kind of outside signal. Light-sensitive receptors sit in the retina at the back of the eye. Sound-sensitive cells line part of the inner ear. Chemical receptors inside the nose react when particular airborne molecules reach them. Pressure can bend a whisker or press against the skin, activating nearby sensory endings. These outside events arrive in different physical forms. Light travels as electromagnetic energy. Sound moves through air as pressure vibrations. Scents consist of molecules carried by air currents. Touch changes the position or shape of tissue. The brain cannot use those forms directly. Receptor cells convert them into electrical activity that can travel through nerves. This conversion is called sensory transduction. The word transduction simply means changing one kind of signal into another. Once a signal enters the nervous system, filtering begins almost immediately. An eye contains millions of receptor cells, yet the brain does not treat every patch of light as equally important. The ears receive steady background sounds from ventilation, distant traffic, and movement within the building. The nose encounters mixtures containing many chemicals at once. Attention has limited capacity, so some signals receive greater processing, while others fade into the background. Evolution helps shape those priorities. experience refines them further during the animal's lifetime. A dog that repeatedly follows a familiar walking route learns which scent patterns belong along it. An unusual chemical trace may then stand out against the expected background. A cat that often watches a particular doorway may react quickly when a thin shadow beneath it changes direction. The response appears sudden because much of the comparison occurred before the body moved. Perception works through active construction. The brain combines incomplete signals with memory and expectation to estimate what is present. A sound partly blocked by furniture may still be located by comparing when it reaches each ear. A broken scent trail may still be followed by sampling nearby air and searching for the strongest continuation. A moving shape seen briefly at the edge of vision may be matched with earlier experience of insects, toys, or small animals. This helps explain why useful intelligence can remain difficult to observe. A cat that detects an unstable object shifting near the edge of a shelf may step away before it falls. There is no later obstacle to escape because early perception prevented it. A dog recognizing a family member by scent before the person enters the room does not need to wait for a clear visual view. The problem has already been reduced by information gathered through another channel. Human-designed puzzles often favor the abilities humans notice most easily. Many rely on direct vision, spoken directions, approaching a person, or reaching toward an object from the front. Human hands can turn lids, lift cups, and point accurately across a room. Dogs and cats bring different equipment to the same apparatus. A dog may wish to investigate the entire object by smell before selecting a side. A cat may examine the edge, test the surface with a paw, or listen for movement within it. Movable ears, facial whiskers, and exploration close to the floor may contribute valuable information that the scoring system never records. The number finally written beside an animal's name therefore begins much earlier than the choice itself. Detection determines which signals become available. Filtering decides which ones receive attention. Memory supplies earlier patterns, while the body limits which actions can follow. Among all these specialized channels, the dog's nose offers one of the clearest examples of a sensory world filled with information that humans can barely detect. The dog lowers its nose toward the floor and begins drawing short breaths through the nostrils. Each inhalation carries a mixture of molecules released by skin, fabric, food, soil, wood, cleaning products, and animals that have already moved through the room. Inside the muzzle, the air does not travel through one simple open tube. It enters a folded chamber lined with thin, curled structures called turbinates. These structures create a large amount of surface area within a small space and guide the air along different paths. Some of the flow supports ordinary breathing. Another portion is directed toward a deeper region used mainly for smell. Anatomical measurements and computer models of canine airflow suggest that roughly 12 to 13% of each inhaled breath travels toward this olfactory recess. Olfactory means related to the sense of smell. Most of the remaining air continues through the respiratory pathway toward the lungs. This separation allows the nose to sample odors while the animal keeps breathing normally. The smelling region is covered with moist tissue containing olfactory receptor cells. Each receptor responds to particular features of airborne molecules. One receptor may react strongly to part of a chemical structure, while another responds to a different feature. The brain receives the combined pattern produced across many receptors. A familiar scent is therefore represented by a broad arrangement of activity rather than by one cell carrying the entire smell. The mixture becomes more complicated in a real room. A shoe can hold traces from pavement, grass, another building, and the skin of the person wearing it. A blanket may carry laundry detergent, household dust, and the scent of every animal that recently rested there. The dog's nervous system must separate useful patterns from this chemical background. Sniffing improves the sample. Short, repeated inhalations bring fresh molecules into the nasal cavity several times in quick succession. Air entering through the front of the nostrils moves toward the sensory tissue. Exhaled air leaves partly through openings along the sides of the nose. That outward flow can help draw nearby odor toward the nostrils, while reducing the amount of exhaled air pushed directly over the source. Each sniff updates the chemical picture. The dog can compare one sample with the next as its head moves a few centimeters to either side. The two nostrils also receive slightly different concentrations. A stronger signal on one side can help indicate the direction of the source, much as differences between the ears help locate a sound. Outdoor tracking adds moving air to the problem. An odor plume rarely forms a smooth trail. Wind stretches it, bends it around walls, and breaks it into separate pockets. Warm ground can lift scent upward. Vegetation can hold molecules close to leaves and stems. A passing vehicle or opening door can disturb the pattern within seconds. The dog follows through repeated sampling and course correction. When the signal weakens, it may sweep its head across the path or circle until a stronger section is found. Memory helps keep the target separate from competing smells. A trained detection dog may be searching for one learned chemical pattern inside luggage containing food, clothing, soap, and plastic. The animal must recognize the target, ignore attractive distractions, and communicate the final decision through a trained response. That work requires attention and self-control, as well as sensitive receptors. Ordinary household behavior uses the same basic system. A dog can identify a familiar person from scent left on clothing before seeing a face. It can recognize where another dog paused during an earlier walk. A route becomes a sequence of chemical landmarks attached to corners, trees, doorways, and patches of ground. Hidden food can be located through concentration changes that grow stronger near the source. Scent also reaches backward in time. A person may have left the room several minutes earlier, yet molecules remain on the chair, floor, and moving air. The visible event has ended while part of its chemical record remains available. For the dog, a quiet hallway can contain information about who passed through, where they paused, and which direction they continued. The lowered head is therefore doing far more than searching for an interesting smell. Airflow, receptor activity, memory, and movement are working together to rebuild a recent event from scattered traces. Cats developed a different way of gathering urgent information, tuned toward the faint sound or brief movement that may appear once and vanish almost immediately. The cat waits with its body low and its paws gathered beneath it. A faint rustle comes from somewhere near the wall. Before the head turns, one outer ear rotates toward the sound. The second ear shifts a moment later, creating a slightly different listening angle. A cat's visible outer ears are called pinnae. They can turn and redirect with considerable independence, changing which parts of the surrounding sound field are emphasized. A noise coming from the left reaches the left ear slightly earlier than the right. It also arrives with a different intensity, because the head partly blocks the sound traveling toward the farther side. These tiny differences give the brain clues about direction. The shape and position of each pinna change the frequencies reaching the inner ear. As the ears rotate, the pattern changes again. The cat can compare those shifting signals and narrow down where the sound began. Domestic cats hear frequencies from roughly 55 Hz to 79 kHz. A hertz is one sound vibration per second. Adult human hearing usually reaches only about 20 kHz at its upper edge, and that limit often declines with age. The cat's range extends far into frequencies people cannot hear. Many small rodents produce ultrasonic calls above the human range. Ultrasonic simply means higher than the frequencies human ears normally detect. A mouse moving behind a wall may therefore create a richer sound pattern for a cat than for the person sitting only a few meters away. Hearing locates the general area. Vision helps the cat track what happens when the source appears. Large pupils allow more light to enter the eye during dim conditions. Behind the pupil, the retina contains light-sensitive cells called rods and cones. Rod cells are especially sensitive when light levels are low. Cone cells provide finer color information and sharper detail in brighter conditions. A cat's retina contains many rods, supporting movement detection during dawn, dusk, and the dim interior of a room at night. This sensitivity comes with a trade-off. Fine daytime detail and color discrimination are less important to a hunting cat than noticing a small shape moving across a darker background. Behind the retina lies a reflective layer called the tapetum lucidum. Light that passes through the retina can strike this layer and travel back through the sensory tissue. That second passage gives rod cells another chance to respond. The same structure produces the bright eye shine seen when a cat's eyes catch a headlight or camera flash. Vision becomes most useful once the target is within view. Very close to the face, whiskers provide another stream of information. The scientific name for these whiskers is vibrissae. Each whisker sits deeply inside a specialized follicle supplied by sensory nerves. When the shaft touches an object or bends, as the cat moves past a surface, mechanoreceptors inside the follicle respond. Mechanoreceptors are sensory endings that react to physical movement or pressure. The whisker itself does not contain nerves along its exposed length. Its movement is transferred down into the sensitive tissue at the base. This helps the cat judge nearby edges, openings, and the position of objects close to the muzzle. A slight disturbance in air may also move the whiskers, although their strongest and clearest role comes from direct mechanical contact. These sensory systems work together during a hunt. A faint sound first draws one ear toward a section of wall or grass. The brain compares arrival time and intensity across both ears. The eyes then watch the most likely exit point. Whiskers become useful when the cat approaches cover, a narrow gap, or an object blocking the face. Movement remains tightly controlled throughout the sequence. The cat may hear the target clearly and still hold its body motionless. This motor inhibition prevents an early step from revealing its position. muscles remain prepared while the nervous system keeps updating distance and direction. A brief movement finally appears. The cat predicts where it will be a fraction of a second later and releases the body into action during that small opening. The stillness before the pounce contains hearing, visual tracking, touch, memory, and restraint. What may look like quiet waiting is a continuous stream of measurement. That sensory precision shaped the cat's independent hunting life. The comparison shifts when the useful signal comes from a human hand, where success depends on treating another species' movement as meaningful communication. Between two identical containers, a person raises one arm. The index finger extends toward the container on the left, while the hand remains well above the floor. Nothing touches the lid. No food is visible. The useful information lies in the direction created by the arm and finger. Pointing feels natural to humans because people begin following simple gestures early in life. For another species, the movement presents an unusual problem. The fingertip marks the beginning of a line rather than the place the animal should approach. Success requires carrying that imaginary line outward until it reaches a separate object. The dog first has to notice that the person is attempting to communicate. Its attention must then move from the face to the arm, along the pointing direction, and toward the correct container. That location has to remain in memory while the dog begins walking. The second container remains visible and may smell just as interesting. Choosing correctly therefore combines social attention, spatial judgment, short-term memory, and self-control. Researchers often use distal pointing to make the task more demanding. Distal means that the person's hand stays some distance from the target instead of touching or hovering directly beside it. A sustained point remains visible while the animal makes its choice. During momentary pointing, the person indicates the location and then lowers the arm before the animal approaches. The second version requires the animal to hold the gesture's meaning after the visible signal has disappeared. Dogs often perform remarkably well in these tasks. Their sensitivity to human communication also appears very early. A study published in 2021 examined 375 puppies at about 8 weeks of age. The puppies included Labrador retrievers, golden retrievers, and mixed service dog puppies from those breeding lines. Most had spent their young lives with their mother and littermates. They had received little individual training from people. Even so, many followed a human pointing gesture successfully from their first trials. They also showed sustained attention toward human faces and voices. Comparisons among related puppies allowed the researchers to estimate how much inherited variation contributed to the results. Genetic differences accounted for more than 40% of the variation in point following and attention to human faces within that group. This does not mean that a puppy is born with a complete human-like understanding of every gesture. Development begins with useful tendencies that experience can strengthen, reshape, or sometimes weaken. A young dog may already be prepared to look toward a person and treat a movement as potentially meaningful. Repeated daily interactions then add detail. A hand reaching toward a leash predicts a walk. A body turning toward a door may signal departure. A voice coming from one side of the room can direct attention there. Dogs can also use head direction, human gaze, body orientation, and the location of a voice under suitable conditions. These skills fit a domestication history in which close attention to people repeatedly produced useful outcomes. Food, access, movement, and cooperative work often depended on noticing what a person was doing. Across generations, dogs that handled those exchanges successfully gained an advantage. Their sensitivity can become strong enough to create mistakes. When a person points toward an empty container, some dogs follow the gesture even when their own nose or earlier observation suggests that food lies elsewhere. The human signal can outweigh information arriving through another sense. That error reveals the importance dogs sometimes give to social guidance. Performance still varies widely. Some dogs lose interest, approach both containers, or rely more heavily on smell. Age, training history, breed background, and comfort with the experimenter can all change the outcome. A species-level advantage describes a broad pattern rather than every individual dog. The direct comparison from 2023 showed that dogs completed more trials than cats and followed both sustained and momentary distal pointing more successfully under the tested conditions. Their advantage was clearest when the task required steady participation with a human communicator. The result supports a genuine canine strength in cooperation across species. The cat seated nearby may also hear its name, follow a person's gaze, or notice the direction of a hand. Its recognition often appears through smaller movements that are easier to overlook. A familiar voice now replaces the lifted hand. Across the room, a person says the cat's name. One ear turns toward the sound. The head may shift by only a few degrees, while the body remains settled in the same place. A small movement like this is easy to miss. People often judge understanding by whether an animal walks over, performs an action, or gives an obvious response. Cats frequently reveal attention through quieter changes. Their ears may rotate toward the speaker. The pupils can widen slightly. A tail tip may move, or the body may become more upright. Scientists can use these reactions to study what a cat detects without requiring it to fetch an object or approach a person. One useful method is called habituation. Habituation is the gradual decline in response that occurs when the same kind of event repeats without consequence. A refrigerator motor may seem noticeable when it first begins humming. After several minutes, the sound fades into the background even though it continues. A similar pattern can be measured in animals. When cats hear several words spoken with a similar length and rhythm, their ear and head movements often become smaller as the sequence continues. The sounds are still reaching the ears. The nervous system has begun treating them as familiar and unimportant. A meaningful change can restore attention. That renewed reaction is called dishabituation. Researchers used this pattern in a study published in 2019 to examine whether cats distinguish their own names from other spoken words. The cats heard a series of general nouns or the names of other cats living in the same home. The words were chosen to resemble the subject's name in length and sound. After several repetitions, the cat's visible responses usually declined. Their own names were then played at the end of the sequence. Many cats showed renewed attention through ear movement, a head turn, tail motion, or a change in posture. The results suggested that they could separate the familiar sound pattern of their names from the words that came before it. This finding needs a careful boundary. A cat may learn that a particular sound often predicts food, touch, play, a person approaching, or some other event. That learned pattern differs from the full human idea of possessing a formal personal name. The experiment demonstrated sound discrimination and learned significance. It did not require the cats to understand identity in exactly the way a person does. Cats also recognize features of familiar human voices. In a study published in 2013, 20 house cats heard recordings of several strangers calling them, followed by a recording of their owner. The cats generally responded through orienting movements rather than walking toward the loudspeaker. Heads and ears turned more strongly when the owner's voice appeared after the unfamiliar voices. The familiar speaker could be identified even though the person was hidden from view. This creates an important distinction between recognition and approach. The cat can detect who is speaking while choosing to remain seated. Movement toward the caller depends on what usually follows the voice, how comfortable the animal feels, and whether another activity currently holds greater value. Human gestures can also influence feline choices. In controlled studies, some cats have followed a person's gaze or pointing direction toward hidden food. Their results tend to be less consistent than those recorded in dogs. Participation can also fall as trials continue, especially in unfamiliar rooms. The direct comparison from 2023 showed the same broad pattern. Dogs followed both sustained and momentary pointing more successfully and completed more usable trials. Cats produced fewer clear choices, although some individuals used the gestures correctly. The difference does not erase the signs that cats notice human communication. It shows that their knowledge is often revealed through a different kind of response. An ear turning toward a voice can confirm detection. A renewed head movement after repeated words can reveal discrimination. Approaching the person requires an additional decision. Once these stages are separated, obedience becomes a poor stand-in for understanding. The visible winner can change according to hunger, comfort, past experience, and the value of whatever waits at the end of the task. Motivation now becomes part of the measurement, shaping whether recognized information ever turns into action. After recognizing a cue, the animal still has to decide whether responding is worth the effort. A cat may hear its name clearly and remain on the chair. A dog may understand a hand signal and turn away because another smell has become more interesting. The ability is present, while the visible performance changes with the situation. Researchers describe this difference as capacity and performance. Capacity refers to what an animal is able to do under suitable conditions. Performance is what appears during a particular attempt, with a particular reward, in a particular place. The gap between them can be surprisingly wide. Food loses value after an animal has eaten. Even during one testing session, repeated pieces of the same treat may become less exciting. The first container may attract quick attention. By the 20th trial, the smell is familiar, the room has been inspected, and the reward may no longer justify another walk across the floor. Individual preferences add further variation. One dog may work eagerly for a piece of dry food. Another responds best to a ball or a few seconds of play. A cat may ignore both and become interested only when the reward smells strongly of fish or moves like prey. A highly valued reward for one animal can carry very little importance for another. Past consequences shape these choices through reinforcement. Reinforcement occurs when a result makes a behavior more likely to happen again. A dog hears the word sit, lowers its body, and receives food. After enough repetitions, the spoken sound predicts both the action and its likely result. A cat hears a cupboard open, walks into the kitchen, and finds dinner waiting. That household routine also becomes a learned chain, even though no one formally planned a training session. Rewards can include access to a doorway, distance from something uncomfortable, or contact with a familiar person. Play can reinforce behavior as effectively as food for some animals. The useful outcome depends on what the individual values at that moment. Dogs often receive many human-led repetitions throughout daily life. They are asked to sit before a leash is attached, wait before crossing a doorway, or return when called. Clear signals are frequently followed by immediate results. Across thousands of years, many dog populations were also selected for tasks requiring continued attention to people. Herding, retrieving, guarding, and scent work rewarded animals that stayed engaged through repeated instructions. This history helped make sustained participation common in dogs. Cats learn large numbers of household patterns as well. They recognize feeding times, familiar footsteps, the sound of a favorite toy, and which person usually opens a particular door. Formal performance on command occurs less often in many homes. A cat may therefore arrive at a pointing experiment with less experience in treating a stranger's repeated gestures as instructions worth following. The 2023 comparison showed this difference unfolding across time. Dogs continued making choices through the laboratory trials, with relatively stable participation. Cats became less willing to approach the containers as the session continued. Some stopped accepting food. Others remained near the edge of the room, or shifted their attention towards sounds and unfamiliar objects. Testing several cats at home improved participation somewhat. Familiar walls, scents, and hiding places reduced part of the uncertainty. The dog still held the stronger result in following the human point. The setting changed willingness without removing the underlying species difference. Stress can narrow attention toward immediate safety. An unfamiliar animal may monitor the doorway, the stranger's movements, or the nearest covered space. A sudden sound outside the room can pull attention away from the planned task. Handling before a trial may also affect how quickly the animal settles. These reactions consume processing that would otherwise be available for choosing between containers. Fatigue adds another filter. Repeated decisions require attention, even when each one looks simple. Novelty may increase interest at first and become tiring later. Previous experience can make the same apparatus seem inviting, unimportant, or unsafe. Calling an animal stubborn hides all of these possible causes behind one word. A refusal can reflect satiety, uncertainty, low reward value, or a learned expectation that the effort rarely pays. Reinforcement strengthens visible behavior, though it reveals only part of what the animal detects or remembers. Expected benefit is continuously weighed against effort and risk. Competing needs enter the calculation as well. When the human signal and social reward are removed, both species must rely more heavily on their own approach to a physical problem. A clear barrier and a visible piece of food can rearrange the apparent contest once again. The experimenter now remains silent while a piece of food sits inside a clear cylinder. From the animal's position, the reward appears close enough to touch. A direct reach meets a solid wall. The successful route curves around the barrier to an open end. This task measures inhibitory control, which is the ability to suppress an immediate action long enough to choose a better one. The food pulls attention straight ahead. Clear material makes that attraction stronger because the reward remains fully visible. Success depends on resisting the first movement and using a route that briefly leads sideways. Cats were tested with this problem in a study involving 8 adults. Before encountering transparent barriers, each cat practiced with opaque cylinders. Opaque material blocks the view through it. The training allowed the animals to learn that food could be reached through openings at the sides. Researchers then replaced the opaque objects with 4 transparent versions. 2 cylinders were made of glass. 2 were plastic. Each material appeared in a large and a small size. The cat began a trial facing the middle of the cylinder, with a reward visible inside. A correct attempt reached an opening without touching the clear front surface. Contact with the front counted as a failure, even when the cat later moved around and collected the food. Performance was extremely strong with the larger objects. The cat succeeded in an average of 98.75% of trials using the large glass cylinder. Their average reached 97.5% with the large plastic version. Results declined when the barriers became smaller. Average success was 83.75% with the small glass cylinder and 73.75% with the small plastic one. The material mattered less than the dimensions. Large cylinders placed the reward farther behind the front wall. Their wider openings also gave the cat more space to insert its head or paw from the side. Smaller versions brought the food closer to the clear surface, while demanding more precise movement around a narrow end. The cat could understand the general solution and still make contact because its paw traveled through a tighter space. This reveals how easily a physical test can mix several abilities. Inhibitory control remains central, since the animal must resist reaching directly toward visible food. Body position and paw movement influence the final score as well. Reward distance changes how strongly the front surface draws the first attempt. The shape of an apparatus can therefore create motor difficulty that the study was never mainly intended to measure. The cat's results on the larger cylinders fell within the range reached by some high-performing apes and corvids in related tests. Corvids are members of the bird family containing crows, ravens, and jays. That comparison gives the feline result real weight. The sample still contained only 8 cats, so it cannot describe every member of the species. A different problem brings the human back into the room without providing a signal. During an unsolvable box experiment, an animal first learns that a container can be opened to obtain food. After several successful attempts, the mechanism is secretly locked. The familiar action suddenly stops working. Researchers record how long the animal continues manipulating the container and whether its attention shifts toward a nearby person. Dogs commonly alternate their gaze between the fixed box and the human. The eyes move from the obstacle to the person, then return toward the obstacle. This pattern can function as a request for assistance. A cooperative animal gains an efficient option when another capable individual is present. Recruiting a partner may solve the problem faster than continuing alone. Cats often spend less time directing this kind of gaze toward people during comparable tasks. Some continue working at the object. Others leave when the expected reward no longer seems available. These outcomes reflect different strategies rather than a single ladder of ability. The cat's strong cylinder performance shows controlled movement around a visible barrier. The dog's gaze toward a person shows an ability to include a social partner within the solution. Both strategies depend on earlier experience and the setting around the task. An immediate obstacle keeps all useful information in view. Memory begins carrying more of the work once the food, toy, or familiar person passes out of sight. A small toy rolls across the floor and disappears behind the sofa. The dog saw where it went. The cat watched the final movement and now waits beside the far edge. Neither animal can see the object anymore, yet its location continues to guide behavior. This ability is called object permanence. It means the brain keeps representing something after direct sight, sound, or touch has ended. Without that ability, a vanished object would effectively stop existing for the animal. Searching would make little sense, because there would be no stored location to search. Object permanence develops gradually in young animals. Early attempts may follow only a simple disappearance. More difficult tasks involve several hiding places, longer delays, or an object moved while the animal cannot see it. Every added step places greater demands on memory. Daily life contains quieter examples. A dog may watch a toy being placed inside a cabinet, leave the room, and return to the same door later. A cat may remain beside one end of a sofa after a ball has rolled underneath, expecting it to emerge from a particular side. Food cupboards, water bowls, favorite beds, and entrances become stable points within the home. The animal does not need to rediscover each one every morning. Working memory carries information needed for an immediate task. It may hold the location of a hidden treat during a delay of several seconds. Once the choice has been made, that short-lived information may fade. Spatial memory lasts longer and supports an internal map of the surrounding area. Repeated movement through a house connects doorways, stairs, furniture, hiding places, and resting surfaces. A cat learns which shelf can be reached from the back of a chair. A dog remembers which hallway leads toward the front entrance. Distances and routes become familiar through hundreds of ordinary journeys. Living individuals can also become part of this mapped environment. A familiar voice usually comes from a body located somewhere in the room or nearby. When the voice moves, the listener expects the person to move with it. Researchers tested this expectation in an experiment published in 2021. The first experiment included 50 domestic cats. 5 additional cats had entered the study, though camera or audio problems prevented their results from being used. Each cat was placed in a familiar room or a suitable testing space with 2 speakers. The speakers were separated by at least 4 meters. From the first speaker, the cat heard a recording of its owner calling its name 5 times. About 2.5 seconds later, another recording played. Depending on the trial, the second sound came from the same speaker or from the speaker across the room. Sometimes the voice still belonged to the owner. Other trials used an unfamiliar person or different sounds. 2.5 seconds was important because a person could not quietly cross the full distance between the speakers during that short gap. When the owner's voice suddenly appeared from the distant location, the sound suggested an impossible movement. The owner seemed to have crossed several meters without footsteps or enough passing time. Observers later examined recordings of the cats without being told which sound condition had occurred. They rated changes such as ear movement, head direction, looking behind the body, and displacement. Displacement meant that the cat shifted position or moved in response to the event. The strongest surprise appeared when the familiar owner's voice moved between distant speakers. The other tested sounds did not produce the same clear effect. This pattern suggests that the cats connected the owner's voice with an estimated position in space. After hearing the first recording, they retained that position for at least the brief delay. The second recording then forced the brain to compare the expected location with the new sound. An impossible change produced a larger visible reaction. The conclusion remained specific. The cats appeared to track an unseen familiar person by voice. The experiment did not reveal a detailed human-style picture inside the brain. Researchers could measure expectation through movement while leaving the private experience unknown. Object permanence connects perception across a gap in time. Working memory preserves a recent location. Spatial knowledge places that location within a larger map. Together, these abilities allow an animal to keep acting after the original signal has disappeared. A person leaving the room can remain represented by the direction of a voice, the sound of footsteps, or the doorway through which they passed. Once a sound can stand for an unseen individual, repeated sounds may also become attached to particular objects, companions, and expected outcomes. A familiar voice can mark where a person is, and repeated sounds can gradually carry more specific meaning. Pets learn that certain sound patterns predict particular events. The click of a cupboard may announce food. A spoken cue can guide an action. A name may become connected with one familiar individual. These abilities occupy several levels. Recognizing a familiar sound pattern requires the animal to separate it from other noises. Following a trained command adds a learned action, such as sitting, turning, or bringing an object. Mapping a spoken label to one particular object requires the sound to remain connected with that item even when several alternatives are present. A border collie named Rico became one of the best-known examples of this ability. His results were reported in 2004. Rico's owners had spent years playing retrieval games with him and naming the objects involved. By the time researchers tested him, he could correctly retrieve more than 200 toys after hearing their spoken labels. The objects were placed in another room, beyond the owner's view. This arrangement reduced the chance that Rico was following an accidental glance or body movement. Researchers also gave him an unfamiliar spoken label, while a new toy sat among several objects he already knew. Rico often selected the unfamiliar toy. This process is called exclusion learning. It means choosing the only unfamiliar object after hearing the only unfamiliar label. The known labels could be ruled out, leaving the new object as the most likely answer. Rico also remembered several new pairings after a delay, although his performance was less accurate than with the labels he had practiced for years. His achievement showed that some dogs can develop a large spoken object vocabulary through repeated interaction. Dogs with this ability remain unusual. Later research on gifted word learners has found small numbers of dogs, often border collies, that acquire many toy names quickly. Most family dogs do not spontaneously learn hundreds of object labels. Rico's performance grew from an uncommon ability, combined with extensive practice and a household that regularly used named objects during play. Cats can form meaningful sound associations as well, though their knowledge is often measured through looking rather than retrieval. A study published in 2022 examined whether cats connected the names of familiar companions with their faces. A cat first heard the owner speak the name of another cat from the same household. A photograph then appeared on a screen. Sometimes the image matched the spoken name. During other trials, the screen showed a different familiar cat. Household cats tended to look at the screen longer when the name and face did not match. Longer looking often signals that an event has violated an expectation. The cat may have anticipated one familiar face after hearing the name, and then spent extra time examining the unexpected image. The result suggests that cats can learn connections between sounds and social individuals through ordinary household life. A more controlled experiment, published in 2024, examined how rapidly new associations could form. 31 adult cats watched short animated images on a screen. Each image appeared with an invented spoken word, including sounds such as parumo and keraru. The pairings repeated several times. Later, the researchers switched some of them, placing a familiar word beside the other image. The cats looked longer during the changed pairings. Their reactions suggested that they had already begun linking each spoken pattern with its original animation. The experiment measured gaze and attention. The cats did not need to fetch an object, touch a screen, or perform a trained response. Human speech produced the clearest reported effect. Trials using electronic sounds as a comparison produced less decisive results. The voice itself may have helped hold attention, especially because domestic cats hear human speech throughout daily life. Repeated co-occurrence builds these links. When one sound and one object regularly appear together, neural activity representing each event overlaps again and again. The connection becomes easier to activate with practice. Later, hearing the sound can produce an expectation of the associated face, toy, movement, or result. Association provides meaningful learning while remaining different from human language. Grammar allows people to combine words through shared rules. Symbolic conversation carries ideas beyond the immediate object or event. Human meaning can include abstract categories and complex relationships. Current pet research supports narrower, measurable abilities. Dogs often reveal their knowledge by retrieving a requested item. Cats may show an expectation through gaze, ear movement, or surprise when a familiar pairing changes. In both cases, spoken sounds become useful because of what repeatedly happens around them. The household voice gains significance through thousands of ordinary pairings. Its effect also depends on who is speaking, where that person is facing, and how the animal expects the interaction to unfold. The same spoken word can produce a different response depending on the person delivering it. A dog may watch more closely when someone faces forward, makes eye contact, and directs a voice toward the animal. The signal changes when that person turns away or focuses on something else. Dogs appear sensitive to these differences in human attention. A study published in 2017 examined 24 family dogs between 1 and 12 years of age. Each dog faced a person under several carefully arranged conditions. Sometimes the person looked directly at the dog. During other trials, the person turned away. Food was visible in some conditions and absent in others. Cameras recorded the dog's facial movements while the human's attention and the presence of food changed separately. The dogs produced more facial movements when the person faced and attended to them. Visible food alone did not create the same increase. This suggests that the dogs were responding strongly to the attentive human audience, rather than simply reacting to the possibility of eating. Two movements appeared especially often when the person was watching. One involved lifting the inner part of the eyebrows, making the eyes appear slightly larger. The other involved showing the tongue. These movements were measured through changes in facial muscles. Their meaning requires care. The result shows that dogs alter facial behavior according to human attention. It does not tell us that a dog deliberately creates a particular expression to imitate sadness or control a person's feelings. Audience awareness can operate through learned expectations. A person who faces the dog may be more likely to speak, offer a cue, provide access, or respond to movement. Years of daily interaction can make body orientation highly useful information. The dog may therefore treat an attentive face as the beginning of an exchange. Researchers have also studied how dogs react when a person fails to provide an expected result. In some experiments, the person appears willing but physically unable to pass food through an opening. During other trials, the person holds the food back even though giving it would be easy. Dogs sometimes wait, move, or look differently in these two situations. Their behavior suggests that they can distinguish visible patterns of willingness and ability. The conclusion remains narrow. The animals respond to differences in action, posture, and repeated outcome. A complete human-style understanding of another individual's private intention would require stronger evidence than these behaviors alone can provide. Cats also adjust their responses according to the way a person presents a social signal. One of the clearest examples involves slow eye narrowing. A relaxed cat may partly close its eyes for a moment, reopen them, and repeat the movement. Researchers tested whether a similar expression from a person could influence feline behavior. The first experiment involved 21 cats from 14 households. Owners sat near their cats and performed a slow sequence of eye narrowing and gentle closing. A comparison condition recorded the cats when the owners were present without carrying out the slow blink sequence. The cats narrowed their eyes more often after their owners made the same kind of movement. This created a measurable exchange between the two species. A second experiment used an unfamiliar researcher. The person either performed slow blinking or maintained a neutral expression. Afterward, the researcher extended a hand toward the cat. Cats were more likely to approach following the slow blink interaction. Their response depended partly on how the unfamiliar person had behaved moments earlier. Slow blinking can therefore be described as a positive communicative interaction. It should not be treated as a universal translation for the sentence, "I love you." Cats differ in temperament, experience, and comfort with eye contact. A fearful or overstimulated animal may respond differently from a relaxed cat in familiar surroundings. The useful finding lies in the two-way pattern. The human changes an expression. The cat notices and adjusts its own behavior. The person responds again. Social communication grows from these connected exchanges, rather than from one signal carrying a fixed meaning in every situation. Dogs and cats both evaluate more than words. Face direction, eye movement, body position, and earlier experience help determine how a cue is understood. A familiar movement can become inviting through repeated safe outcomes. The same movement from an unknown person may carry less value until the interaction develops. Attention has its greatest effect when the individual offering it has already become predictable. Repeated experiences can turn a familiar human into more than a source of signals. That person can also become a stable point of safety when the surroundings feel uncertain. When the familiar person steps out of view, the room can feel different, even though the furniture has not moved. A dog may pause near the doorway. A cat may stop exploring and listen toward the place where the person disappeared. Researchers can observe these changes through a pattern called the secure base effect. A secure base is a familiar individual whose presence makes exploration easier during an uncertain situation. The animal may move farther from the person, investigate an object, or settle more quickly because dependable support remains available nearby. Attachment and independence can therefore appear together. An animal resting across the room may still be using the familiar person as part of its sense of safety. Continuous touching, following, or sitting on a lap is unnecessary. Researchers often examine this relationship through separation and reunion tests. The animal first enters a controlled room with its caregiver. During this opening period, researchers record movement, exploration, contact, and attention toward unfamiliar objects. The caregiver then leaves for a short time. Observers note changes such as vocalizing, waiting near the door, reduced exploration, pacing, or attempts to follow. The person eventually returns. Greeting behavior is recorded, along with the animal's ability to settle and resume ordinary activity. Recovery carries special importance. A dog may approach the owner, make brief contact, and then return to a puzzle or unfamiliar corner. A cat may move toward the caregiver, raise its tail, or rub against a leg before continuing to inspect the room. These patterns show that the reunion helped reduce uncertainty. Dogs often work more confidently on unfamiliar tasks when their owners are present. A puzzle containing hidden food or a movable object may receive more attention when the dog knows its familiar person remains nearby. The same dog can become less persistent after the owner leaves. Replacing the owner with a stranger does not always restore the earlier level of exploration. Any human presence may offer some useful information, especially to a social species. Relationship history adds another layer. The owner has been connected with thousands of repeated outcomes involving meals, walks, doors opening, protection, and return after absence. Those experiences build a strong prediction of available support. Cats can form a similar kind of attachment while expressing it through their own movement patterns. A study published in 2019 examined kittens and adult cats with a separation and reunion procedure. Among the kittens whose behavior could be clearly classified, about 64% were placed in the securely attached group. The adult cats produced a similar result, with roughly 66% receiving the secure classification. Securely classified cats often showed some reaction when the caregiver left. After the person returned, they approached or greeted them, reduced signs of distress, and then resumed exploration. Their behavior became balanced again. Some contact was followed by movement back into the room. This pattern fits a secure base because reassurance supports renewed independence. Other cats displayed different responses. Some remained highly distressed or continued demanding contact after reunion. Others avoided interaction or showed limited change when the person returned. Individual history, temperament, and the testing environment can influence these classifications. A brief laboratory visit cannot capture every part of a relationship formed across months or years. Attachment categories describe visible behavior under particular conditions. They do not measure the private depth of affection inside an animal. The useful evidence lies in the sequence of actions. A familiar person leaves. Exploration or emotional balance changes. The person returns, and the animal's behavior begins to settle. Memory supports this process. The animal recognizes the individual through scent, voice, appearance, and past experience. Repeated, reliable outcomes create an expectation that this person can provide help or stability. Emotional regulation allows the body to recover after the uncertainty of separation. As arousal decreases, attention becomes available for the wider room again. A dog looking back during a difficult task may be checking whether support remains present. A cat relaxing its posture after a caregiver returns may be responding to restored predictability. Both actions carry measurable meaning without requiring an invented story about the animal's hidden thoughts. Safety changes what the brain is free to do. Less attention is needed for monitoring exits, unfamiliar sounds, or possible threats. More of it can move toward objects, movement, social partners, and learning. That learning begins early, when puppies and kittens discover how their bodies work through play, small mistakes, and repeated feedback. A kitten crouches behind a chair leg and watches a small toy cross the floor. Its shoulders lower. The rear paws adjust by a few centimeters. After a brief pause, the body springs forward. This simple game contains several parts of a hunting sequence. The kitten has to estimate distance, control its balance, and place each limb while moving. A slightly early pounce lands short. Too much force sends the toy rolling farther away. Each attempt produces information that can improve the next one. Object play gives young cats a safe way to rehearse stalking, batting, carrying, and gripping. Losing balance also matters. A kitten that slides on a smooth floor must quickly correct the position of its paws and tail. The nervous system compares the expected landing with what actually happened. That difference becomes part of future movement. Puppies often practice through more social games. One puppy chases while another turns away. Roles may reverse only seconds later. Mouthing, retreating, pausing, and beginning again require both animals to watch each other closely. A playbow, with the front legs lowered and the rear body raised, can signal that the movement is part of a game. Social play differs from object play because another animal keeps changing the situation. Locomotor play, such as running in wide loops or making sudden turns, focuses more strongly on movement itself. All three forms can contribute to development. Force control becomes especially important during puppy play. When a bite becomes too hard, the other puppy may yelp, withdraw, or stop participating. That consequence helps shape bite inhibition. Bite inhibition means controlling jaw pressure before it causes harm. The puppy gradually learns that gentler contact keeps the game going. Play also trains attention switching. A moving toy may suddenly stop. A partner may change direction. An unfamiliar sound can interrupt the action. The young animal must decide whether to continue, pause, or investigate. Repeated practice strengthens persistence while also teaching when persistence should end. Small surprises become easier to recover from because the body has experienced many harmless mistakes. Learning continues outside formal play. A kitten watches another cat reach a shelf from the back of a sofa. A puppy sees a person turn a door handle before the doorway opens. Food containers develop meaning through sound, location, and timing. Footsteps from a familiar person may predict movement toward the kitchen or the front entrance. Household life provides thousands of repeated connections between actions and results. Observation can shorten the learning process. An animal that watches another individual solve a simple problem may approach it with a useful starting idea. Direct experience still supplies the final correction. The height of the shelf, the weight of the door, and the animal's own body all affect whether the observed action will work. Safe complexity creates more chances for these adjustments. Different floor textures challenge balance. Low platforms provide manageable changes in height. Changing routes through a room encourage spatial learning. Toys that roll, swing, or hide part of themselves create new prediction problems. Scents from outdoor air, visitors, and other animals add information without requiring a large physical change. Social interactions teach which movements bring attention and which ones end an exchange. Inherited tendencies influence how young animals approach these opportunities. The study of 8-week-old service dog puppies showed that many followed human gestures before receiving much individual training. Genetic differences explained a meaningful share of variation in their early attention to faces and pointing. Experience continued shaping those abilities after the first test. A puppy living closely with people receives daily practice in tracking hands, voices, and body direction. Cats arrive with strong preparation for detecting movement, controlling a pounce, and exploring spaces with their ears and whiskers. The household then reshapes those starting points. A kitten raised around calm people may become more comfortable approaching human hands. Another raised with varied climbing surfaces may develop greater confidence in vertical movement. Sensitive developmental periods make early experience especially influential. During these windows, the nervous system changes rapidly in response to social contact, movement, and surroundings. Later learning remains possible. Older cats and dogs can still acquire new routines, adjust to new homes, and solve unfamiliar tasks. They may simply need more repetition or a slower introduction. neural pathways become more efficient through a repeating cycle. The animal predicts what will happen, acts, receives a result, and adjusts future behavior. A playful pounce or gentle chase therefore serves as practice for attention, movement, and control. When the game ends and the young animal curls into sleep, the day's learning has not completely stopped. Recent experiences can continue being processed while the body rests. As the puppy's breathing slows, its legs relax against the floor, and the room becomes quiet again. The body has stopped playing, while the nervous system continues moving through a series of organized changes. Sleep is an active biological state. Electrical activity rises and falls across the brain as the animal passes through non-REM sleep and REM sleep. Non-REM sleep includes periods when brain activity becomes slower and more regular. Muscles usually loosen, breathing becomes steadier, and the animal becomes less responsive to ordinary sounds. During REM sleep, brain activity becomes more mixed and active. The eyes may move beneath closed lids, and small muscles can briefly twitch. A paw may flex or part of the muzzle may shift. Those movements cannot reveal the exact content of a dream. They show that the sleeping nervous system remains active even while most of the body is still. Recent learning begins in a fragile condition. A puppy that has just practiced a spoken cue may perform it correctly during one session and struggle later if the memory has not become stable. A cat that explored a new route may need repeated experience before the path becomes familiar. The process that helps recent information become more durable is called memory consolidation. Consolidation can strengthen useful connections and reorganize parts of an experience after the original event has ended. Sleep may support this process because fewer new sights, sounds, and actions compete with the patterns formed earlier. Researchers have studied sleeping dogs by recording electrical activity from the surface of the head. The method is called electroencephalography. It uses small sensors placed against the scalp to detect broad electrical rhythms produced by groups of brain cells. No surgery is required. Family dogs can be introduced to the equipment gradually and allowed to settle beside their owners in a quiet room. Once relaxed, many fall asleep naturally during an afternoon recording. The sensors cannot read a specific memory or private thought. They reveal changing patterns linked with wakefulness, non-REM sleep, and REM sleep. A study published in 2024 examined how learning, reward expectations, and later sleep might interact. 24 family dogs took part. Each dog completed sessions involving familiar commands and newly learned word-action pairings. The animals then rested during a 2-hour non-invasive sleep recording. Their performance was tested again afterward. One part of the experiment changed the emotional value of the training experience. Some dogs encountered an outcome that was more rewarding than they had expected. A task that had produced a modest response from the trainer was later followed by warmer praise or a more desirable reward. Several dogs in this condition performed better when tested after sleep. The results suggested that a positive surprise during learning may influence how information is processed during the following rest period. Emotional context affects attention while an event is happening. An animal that becomes more engaged by an unexpectedly valuable outcome may encode the experience more strongly. Encoding is the early stage in which new information is converted into a form the nervous system can retain. Sleep may later help stabilize selected parts of that pattern, while reducing interference from unrelated activity. The findings require careful limits. The study did not include an equivalent group that remained awake for the same period, so improvement cannot be assigned to sleep alone with complete certainty. Researchers also found no simple connection between every measured sleep feature and later performance. A longer period in one sleep stage did not automatically predict a stronger memory for every dog. The experiment supports a possible interaction among reward, learning, and sleep. It does not show that every nap permanently strengthens every lesson. Memory studies often produce mixed results. The kind of task matters. Timing between training and sleep can change the outcome. Motivation varies among individuals, and one dog may find the reward far more valuable than another. Dog sleep has been examined with surface brain recordings more often than comparable learning during household cat sleep. This leaves the canine evidence more detailed, while many feline mechanisms remain less directly tested. The sleeping cat or dog still offers a grounded image of ongoing biological work. Recent voices, routes, games, and rewards may leave temporary patterns that the brain continues to sort after the eyes close. Each animal carries a different history into sleep, so identical training and equal resting time can still produce very different results when morning arrives. The differences seen after sleep are part of a much larger spread, hidden inside the words dog and cat. Domestic dogs belong to one species, yet their bodies and behavior can look almost unrelated. A small companion dog may weigh less than 3 kilograms. A livestock guardian can exceed 60 kilograms and spend its working life watching sheep across open ground. Scent hounds were shaped to follow odors over long distances. Retrievers were selected to notice where an object fell, travel toward it, carry it gently, and return to a person. Herding dogs often respond quickly to movement and distant signals. These histories influence which information attracts attention and which actions come most easily. Researchers examined this variation in a study involving 1,002 dogs from 13 breeds. The dogs completed a collection of tasks measuring social communication, physical problem solving, activity, persistence, and self-control. Breed differences appeared in the use of human gestures. Some groups relied strongly on pointing, while others gave more weight to their own observations. Responses also differed when a misleading human cue directed the dog away from useful information. Spatial detour tasks produced variation in how dogs moved around barriers. Cylinder tests revealed differences in the ability to resist reaching directly toward visible food. Certain breeds remained active at an unsolvable problem for longer periods. Others looked toward a person sooner or left the task. Exploration and human-directed behavior varied as well. Those findings reflect the kinds of work different dog populations performed across generations. A herding breed often benefited from watching people and livestock at the same time. A scent hound needed enough independence to continue following an odor, even when the handler could not see its source. Selection changed broad tendencies, rather than creating fixed instructions inside every puppy. The same study found no significant breed differences in its short-term memory task or its test of logical reasoning. That result prevents the breeds from forming a simple ranking from smartest to least intelligent. A dog can excel in social attention while performing typically in memory. Another may show strong persistence and less interest in a pointing hand. Each task measures only part of a larger profile. Breed averages also leave considerable overlap. A retriever may ignore a thrown toy. A companion breed may become highly skilled at scent work. Training history can outweigh a general breed tendency within one household. Free breeding village dogs grow up making many daily choices with limited formal instruction. Working dogs may practice one narrow set of skills for years. Shelter dogs can enter a study with unknown histories and recent stress. Highly trained pets arrive with extensive experience in following gestures, waiting for rewards, and working through repeated trials. Their test scores begin long before the apparatus is placed on the floor. Cats contain less dramatic variation in body shape, yet their behavior also differs greatly among individuals. Some approach an unfamiliar visitor within minutes. Others remain hidden until the room becomes quiet again. Activity level, sociability, exploration, and sensitivity to novelty can remain fairly consistent across time. A bold cat may inspect a new object quickly enough for its ability to become visible. A cautious cat may spend the entire session evaluating distance, exits, and unfamiliar scent. Temperament changes what researchers are able to observe under pressure. Living arrangements create additional differences. A cat raised alone receives most of its social experience from people. Cats in multi-cat homes watch companions move through doorways, approach food, climb furniture, and react to household sounds. Those repeated observations can create different learning opportunities. Relationships within the group also matter, because a trusted companion provides a different experience from a frequently avoided one. Age adds another layer, without supplying a simple answer. An older dog may approach slowly, because its joints are stiff. A senior cat may miss a quiet cue after hearing has declined. Vision changes can affect transparent barriers and distant gestures. Fatigue, discomfort, and reduced reward value may shorten participation. Cognitive aging can occur as well, though speed by itself cannot reveal its cause. Genes create probabilities. Development, health, training, and daily experience shape how those probabilities become behavior. Each cat or dog enters the comparison as a particular animal with a particular history. Even careful experiments can only measure the individuals who participate, using methods that may suit one species better than the other. The variation inside the animals is broad, and the scientific record describing them has its own uneven shape. Published evidence begins long before a result appears in a table. Researchers first recruit animals, bring them into a setting, present a task, record behavior, decide which trials can be used, and analyze the remaining data. Differences can enter at every step. Dog cognition research has developed a large testing system around companion animals. Many family dogs are accustomed to car rides, leashes, strangers, training rooms, and repeated human instructions. Their owners can guide them into a laboratory, ask them to wait, and help them settle beside unfamiliar equipment. This makes it possible to test large groups with the same containers, distances, gestures, and time limits. Standardization improves comparison. When every dog receives nearly identical trials, researchers can measure differences with greater confidence. The controlled setting may resemble ordinary dog life only loosely. Ecological relevance describes how closely a test matches the situations an animal normally encounters. Choosing between laboratory cups may be easy to measure, while revealing less about tracking a scent outdoors or navigating a familiar home. Cats often require a different approach. Many feline studies take place inside homes, familiar rooms, or cat cafes where the animals already know the scents and hiding places. Researchers may measure looking time, ear movement, head direction, surprise, or spontaneous choices. These methods allow a cat to reveal recognition without learning a formal response. A looking time experiment records how long the animal watches an expected or unexpected event. Longer attention after a pairing changes can suggest that the cat noticed the mismatch. That kind of result cannot be compared directly with a dog retrieving the correct toy 20 times. The tasks measure behavior through different outward channels. Home testing improves comfort while adding new sources of variation. One living room may contain another pet behind a door. A different home may have traffic noise, food smells, unfamiliar camera equipment, or an owner standing slightly outside the planned position. Room shape and furniture change the available routes. Even small differences in the owner's voice or posture can affect an animal that knows that person well. Participation creates another filter called attrition. Attrition means that some animals begin a study, but do not provide enough usable trials to remain in the final analysis. A cat may stay inside its carrier, hide beneath furniture, refuse the reward, or leave the camera's view. Interest can fade before the full set of choices is completed. Those animals disappear from the final score even though their withdrawal may reflect stress or low motivation rather than limited understanding. The remaining sample may contain unusually bold, food-motivated, or adaptable cats. The 2023 pointing comparison showed this process clearly. None of the 21 dogs were excluded from the pointing test. Cats were lost at several stages because some hid, would not leave a carrier, stopped accepting food, or produced too few choices. 33 cats reached the laboratory pointing stage, and 15 chose often enough to meet the study's participation standard. The dogs gave researchers a fuller behavioral record. That difference was itself part of the species comparison, though it also reduced the amount of feline evidence available. Small samples add further caution. The widely discussed neuron study compared one domestic cat with 2 domestic dogs. Its cortical cell counts remain valuable anatomical measurements. 3 animals cannot capture the full variation across either species. The transparent cylinder experiment involved 8 adult cats. Their strong performance changed noticeably when the cylinders became smaller. Barrier dimensions and reward distance affected paw movement as well as self-control. A test designed to measure cognition was partly measuring how a particular body fitted a particular object. Publication adds the final filter. Clear, positive findings are often easier to publish than failed tasks or uncertain patterns. This publication bias can make the scientific record appear more decisive than the complete history of attempted experiments. Uncertainty should narrow a conclusion to the evidence that genuinely supports it. dogs show a strong advantage in human-directed cooperation across many studies. Cats show recognition, spatial tracking, and controlled problem-solving through methods suited to quieter responses. The uneven record leaves some abilities described in greater detail than others. That careful boundary still has practical value. Understanding how each species gathers information can shape the room's routines and challenges people provide during ordinary daily life. A useful environment begins with the abilities an animal already brings into the room. Cognitive enrichment gives those abilities something safe and manageable to do. The challenge should match the animal's senses, body, age, and experience. A dog may need opportunities to follow scent, make choices, and cooperate with a person. A cat may benefit from height, concealment, and movement that can be watched before it is pursued. Simply owning many toys does not guarantee meaningful enrichment. A basket filled with motionless objects can become part of the furniture. The toy gains value when it moves, hides something, carries scent, or changes according to the animal's actions. For dogs, smell offers one of the richest places to begin. A scent walk allows time to examine grass, posts, tree trunks, and places where other animals have passed. The distance traveled may be modest. The amount of information gathered can still be large. A single patch of ground may contain traces from several dogs, people, food, rainwater, and nearby plants. Stopping to investigate requires discrimination and memory. The dog compares the current mixture with earlier experience and chooses which trail deserves more attention. Searching games use the same system indoors. Food can be hidden beneath a light cup, inside folded fabric, or around a familiar room. The difficulty should increase gradually. A puzzle that remains impossible for too long can produce frustration rather than useful effort. Motor design matters as well. A senior dog with stiff joints may struggle with a device that slides across the floor. A short-nosed dog may find a deep, narrow opening difficult to reach. The best task creates a clear connection between investigation and success. Retrieving and cooperative games add social information. A dog may follow a person's gesture, wait briefly, search, and return with an object. Choice can be included by offering two routes, allowing the dog to select a toy, or pausing long enough for it to indicate whether the activity should continue. These small decisions use the animal's strong attention to human partners without turning every interaction into obedience practice. Cats need challenges shaped around a different movement pattern. Vertical shelves, stable climbing structures, and raised resting places allow the animal to survey a room from above. Covered beds and open carriers provide retreat without removing access to the household. Scratching surfaces support stretching, scent marking, and normal claw use. Their position and texture affect whether the cat finds them useful. Play becomes more complete when it follows a short predatory sequence. The cat searches for movement, lowers the body, and begins stalking. A toy then moves quickly enough to be chased. The sequence should end with something the cat can physically catch. This tangible conclusion matters because endless pursuit without contact can leave the action unfinished. A small food reward may follow for some cats, though preference varies. Food searching can also draw on feline spatial memory. Several small portions placed in safe locations create a reason to investigate different parts of the home. The hiding places should remain accessible and should never force the animal into a space where it feels trapped. Control influences whether novelty feels enriching. A predictable routine reduces unnecessary uncertainty. Within that routine, choice allows the animal to approach, withdraw, investigate, or rest. A new tunnel may interest one cat and unsettle another. A crowded dog may prefer distance from visitors rather than a new social game. Temperament shapes the useful level of challenge. Health and sensory function change it over time. An older cat with reduced vision may need stable furniture placement. A dog with hearing loss may respond better to hand signals or scent-based activities. Behavior during these moments provides information. A dog looking toward a person during a difficult puzzle may be using a well-developed social strategy. The glance can serve as an efficient request for help. A cat that leaves a task may have lost interest, disliked the setting, or found the reward too weak. Calling either response disobedient hides the reason behind it. Punishment can stop a visible action for a time. It does not automatically teach the animal what to do instead, or solve the need that produced the behavior. A calmer approach observes the signal, adjusts the environment, and rewards a useful alternative. Understanding therefore changes care at a practical level. The animal receives challenges that fit its sensory world, while the person gains a clearer way to read success, hesitation, and refusal. Back in the quiet room, the dog and cat can now be compared with a much more precise measuring line. The dog has settled near the person's chair. Its eyes lift when the person shifts position. A hand moves toward the table, and the dog follows the motion before anything is picked up. The same animal may recognize a familiar spoken sound, track a pointing finger across the room, and glance back toward the person when an object refuses to open. Each of those actions fits a history shaped by close cooperation. Dogs lived beside humans long before permanent farming villages spread across much of Europe. Over many generations, attention to human movement became useful during hunting, guarding, herding, retrieving, and ordinary household life. That preparation appears early. 8-week-old puppies have followed pointing gestures during their first trials, even before receiving much individual training. The canine brain comparison also supplied a physical advantage. The cat examined in the 2017 study had about 250 million neurons in its cerebral cortex. The smaller dog had roughly 429 million. The golden retriever had around 623 million cortical neurons. More neurons can provide additional units for combining signals, storing associations, and selecting flexible actions. Available evidence, therefore, gives dogs the stronger claim in two important areas. They perform more reliably in human-directed cooperative tasks, especially pointing experiments. The dogs examined also possess substantially more cortical neurons than the cat examined. That is a real result, rather than a polite tie between two popular pets. Its meaning remains tied to the abilities actually measured. Across the room, the cat sits on the raised edge of a window seat. One ear turns toward a faint sound near the wall. The eyes remain focused on the lower corner of the curtain, where a slight movement appeared moments earlier. A brief sound can be placed within the room by comparing what reaches each ear. Large pupils and a rod-rich retina support movement detection in dim light. Whiskers provide close-range information when the cat later approaches an edge or narrow opening. The body may remain still while those signals are being combined. That restraint is part of the solution. A small felid hunting alone often benefited from waiting until distance, direction, and timing lined up. Modern cats still show abilities shaped by that history. They can track the expected location of an unseen owner from a familiar voice. Some use human pointing, although less reliably than dogs understand test conditions. Others reveal learned connections by looking longer, when a known name is paired with the wrong face. Cats have also performed strongly in transparent cylinder tasks that require suppressing a direct reach toward visible food. These abilities form a specialized cognitive profile. Many common tests measure that profile imperfectly because they reward repeated approach, sustained food motivation, or close cooperation with an unfamiliar person. A universal ranking would require every useful ability to be placed on one shared scale. Current science does not provide such a scale. The evidence instead supports a domain-specific conclusion. Dogs lead in human cooperation and in the available comparison of cortical neuron numbers. Cats show notable strengths in sensory prediction, spatial tracking, motor inhibition, and selective learning. Individual history can still shift the result within either species. A highly trained cat may outperform an inexperienced dog on a particular task. A scent hound may ignore a visual gesture while following chemical information unavailable to the human observer. Age, health, motivation, and temperament also determine whether an ability becomes visible during one short test. Intelligence emerges from several systems working together. Neural capacity supplies the living cells and connections. Sensory organs determine which information enters. Evolution shapes which signals receive priority. Learning adds the memory of earlier consequences. Motivation influences whether the animal chooses to act. The problem itself decides which of those abilities becomes useful. In the quiet room, the dog remains close enough to notice the person's next movement. The cat stays slightly higher, listening toward a place hidden from view. One animal is especially prepared to share attention across species. The other is especially prepared to locate a brief event and act on its own timing. Both have been gathering information throughout the evening. The dog notices one layer of the room. The cat hears another layer of the night. Neither animal has anything left to prove.